In 1883, a British surveyor digging through the rubble of ancient Egypt picked up a small, discarded piece of granite and realized human history was a lie. The rock was a piece of waste, a cylindrical core left behind by a drill, but the spiral grooves cut into its surface proved the tool that made it was biting into solid stone faster than a modern diamond-tipped machine. Lear taught that early civilizations built their worlds using soft copper, wet sand, and endless patience, slowly learning how to shape the earth. But the physical marks left on thousands of blocks, vases, and statues around the world tell a completely different, much darker story of high-speed engineering that vanished without a trace. Join us and let's discover the impossible ancient engineering that modern science cannot recreate. Let's go. Topic number 13. Egyptian drill cores. Spinning into solid granite faster than modern industrial diamond drills, an ancient machine left behind physical evidence that completely shatters our accepted historical timeline. William Flinders Petrie found these discarded cylinder cores in the Egyptian dirt in 1883, instantly recognizing the absolute impossibility of the spiral grooves carved into their perfectly smooth sides. When he meticulously measured the depth and spacing of these continuous cuts, the mathematics revealed a terrifying mechanical reality for mainstream archaeologists. To achieve this uninterrupted spiral without shattering the cutting tool or fracturing the raw rock requires an immense, perfectly balanced downward force. Petrie calculated it would take over 2 tons of constant pressure pushing straight down to bite into the dense granite this aggressively. Human arms operating primitive hand tools absolutely cannot generate 2 tons of uninterrupted mechanical pressure. Hand drilling inherently leaves sloppy, uneven marks because muscles tire, grips slip, and the cutting angle constantly shifts under extreme physical strain. These anomalous grooves remain surgically identical from the top of the core all the way to the bottom, proving beyond any doubt that they were carved by a stabilized machine operating at extreme speed. The physical evidence refuses to align with the accepted academic narrative of copper chisels and wet sand. And the terrifying cutting speed required to leave these specific marks reveals that this single piece of scrap was merely a tiny byproduct of a much larger, completely undocumented manufacturing operation.
Topic number 12. Pre-dynastic vases. More than 40,000 perfectly hollowed vessels carved from the absolute hardest stones on Earth sit in global museums, created by a civilization that supposedly possessed no advanced tools. These anomalous artifacts date back to the deep, shadowy pre-dynastic era of Egypt, long before the pharaohs ruled, when humanity was allegedly just learning to scrape rocks together. Modern laser scans of these mysterious vessels reveal walls just millimeters thick, completely symmetrical, and sometimes thin enough to let natural light pass directly through the solid, dense stone. The internal cavities bulge outward beneath incredibly narrow necks, creating a physical geometry that makes it literally impossible to fit a standard hand tool inside to scrape away the internal material. When modern aerospace machinists measure the outer curves, they find the left and right halves mirror each other to within the microscopic width of a single human hair. A highly skilled modern craftswoman spent 2 agonizing years attempting to recreate just one simple vase using the primitive tools historians insist were available. Her final product was completely lopsided, rough, and fundamentally inferior to the ancient originals, forcing the admission that reproducing this level of absolute perfection by hand is a pure mechanical impossibility. These smooth, glassy surfaces carry absolutely no tool marks whatsoever, displaying a level of precision that exceeds modern automated factory standards. The sheer volume of these objects proves this was an industrial assembly line, hiding an even heavier, far more massive secret waiting in the dark.
Only 1% of people know the dark truth behind what we are about to show you next. If you want to be part of the few who actually know what's happening in the world, subscribe and leave a like right now. Done? Look at this. 24 monolithic granite boxes, weighing up to 100 tons each, sit perfectly machined in pitch-black subterranean tunnels beneath the Egyptian desert, completely defying the limits of primitive engineering. Christopher Dunn, an aerospace engineer who spent decades building precision parts for jet engines, carried specialized calibration gauges into the claustrophobic corridors of the Serapeum to measure these massive sarcophagi. Placing his precision straightedges against the interior walls, he discovered the solid stone was perfectly flat to within 0.02 of an inch. To put that extreme metric into perspective, this is the exact same strict manufacturing tolerance required for high-speed modern aircraft components. The internal corners are cut perfectly square, and the opposing walls remain absolutely parallel across feet of solid, unyielding granite. If a modern engineering firm were contracted to build these identical boxes today, they would require massive computer-controlled diamond saws and industrial grinding machinery just to meet the specifications found in these dark, suffocating tunnels. The ancient builders somehow managed to quarry these colossal blocks in Aswan, transport them for miles, lower them into a cramped subterranean maze, and hollow them out with flawless geometric accuracy in near-total darkness. The mainstream academic claim that this was achieved by men striking rocks against other rocks becomes completely absurd the moment a calibrated measuring tool touches the surface. This terrifying level of geometric control over impossible weights eventually traveled across the globe to slice straight through dense volcanic rock.
Topic number 10. Puma Punku. Massive blocks of solid andesite are cut with such surgical precision that they snap together like a giant weaponized puzzle in the freezing, high-altitude deserts of Bolivia. The devastated ruins of Puma Punku feature colossal stones heavily machined into complex interlocking H shapes, fitting together flawlessly without any mortar holding them in place. Andesite is an incredibly dense, unforgiving volcanic rock that absolutely shreds conventional metal blades, yet these blocks feature perfectly sharp interior right angles and deeply drilled holes of varying depths. When modern engineers examine the specific cavities, they find uniform distances and equal spacing that strongly dictate the ancient builders were using standardized geometric templates and motorized bits. The mechanical cuts are so clean and completely flat that a razor blade cannot be slipped into the joints where the massive stones meet. Mainstream history demands we accept that a high-altitude agricultural society shaped these brutal rocks using primitive copper axes and smaller stones. Attempting to pound andesite with another stone only shatters the rock or leaves brutal, jagged craters, completely failing to produce the smooth, perfectly grooved lines seen across the entire site. The sheer consistency of the repeating H-blocks indicates a mass production assembly line requiring an industrial process capable of stamping out identical modular building materials in a desolate wasteland. This modular perfection implies a highly advanced structural blueprint, scaling up to completely different geological nightmares currently hiding out in the open ocean.
Topic number 9. Nan Madol. An entire megalithic city sits constructed directly on top of a fragile coral reef in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, built from incredibly heavy magnetic rocks that should immediately sink. The ruined city of Nan Madol consists of nearly 100 artificial islets constructed from massive, naturally hexagonal basalt logs weighing up to 50 tons each. These brutally heavy columns of volcanic rock were somehow transported across the open water and stacked meticulously to form towering walls, creating a sprawling grid of canals known as the Venice of the Pacific. Moving 50-ton magnetic basalt logs over deep water using primitive wooden rafts is a massive logistical nightmare that completely defies the basic physics of buoyancy and maritime engineering. The sheer weight of the stones should have instantly crushed the delicate coral reef foundations beneath them, yet the ancient builders understood extreme load distribution perfectly, creating a stable megalithic metropolis that has survived centuries of violent ocean typhoons.
There are absolutely no quarries on the immediate island capable of producing these specific hexagonal pillars, meaning the thousands of tons of material had to be sourced from miles away and floated across treacherous currents. The native oral traditions insist the heavy rocks were flown through the air using acoustic levitation, a myth highlighting the complete lack of any rational physical explanation for the construction. The mastery required to stack these colossal weights on water points directly to a global obsession with manipulating impossible masses without cranes.
Topic number 8. Sacsayhuaman. Massive, jagged boulders weighing up to 200 tons, locked together in 3 dimensions with such extreme friction-fitting accuracy that a piece of paper cannot pass through the gaps. Looming heavily over the city of Cusco, this megalithic fortress is constructed using polygonal masonry, where every single enormous block is cut into a completely unique, irregular shape. There are no standard rectangular bricks found here, just colossal, deformed rocks that perfectly match the complex, multi-angled cavities of the heavy stones surrounding them. Modern industrial cranes would instantly buckle under the sheer weight of these structures, yet the ancient builders somehow lifted, rotated, and carved them so precisely that absolutely no mortar was ever needed to keep the towering walls standing through centuries of violent tectonic earthquakes. To shape a 200-ton rock to match a unique 7-sided hole requires stripping away material with laser-like precision while constantly suspending the massive weight in midair to continually test the perfect fit. Mainstream historians stubbornly suggest the builders achieved this by repeatedly lifting and dropping the stones while scraping the surfaces, a pure physical impossibility that would instantly pulverize the fragile edges of the raw rock. The contact points between the massive stones are flush across deeply recessed angles, proving the builders could mold the rock as if it were soft clay. The technology required to manipulate these 200-ton rocks is terrifying, but it completely pales in comparison to the apocalyptic scale of weight hoisted into the air on the other side of the world.
Topic number 7. Baalbek Trilithon. 3 colossal limestone blocks weighing 1,000 tons each sit suspended 20 feet in the air, physically breaking every known limit of ancient mechanical lifting power. Hidden within the foundations of a Roman temple in Lebanon, the Trilithon represents a terrifying shift in the sheer scale of human capability that mainstream archaeology simply refuses to explain. While the Romans built the smaller, more manageable temple on top, there is absolutely no record, technology, or logical military reason for the Roman Empire to quarry foundational blocks of this apocalyptic size. Just a few hundred yards away, in the original quarry, lies the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, a monolithic rectangular block weighing over 1,200 tons, sliced perfectly underneath, but left fully attached to the bedrock. Moving a single 1,000-ton stone today requires heavy multi-lane hydraulic crawlers, solid steel tracks, and the combined effort of specialized global engineering firms. The unknown ancient engineers somehow sliced these leviathans from the earth, transported them across uneven terrain without leaving massive trenches, and hoisted them over 20 feet into the air to lock them tightly against one another. If humanity possessed the raw mechanical power to manipulate 1,000 tons of solid rock in the ancient Levant, the standard narrative of slow, linear technological progress is fundamentally destroyed forever. This absolute mastery over physical matter was not just limited to moving impossibly heavy stones, but actively manipulating the elemental chemistry of raw metal itself.
Topic number 6. Iron Pillar of Delhi. Standing completely exposed to harsh weather for over 16 centuries, a massive iron column refuses to rust, defying the basic chemical laws of planetary metallurgy. The Iron Pillar of Delhi weighs over 6 tons and is made of entirely pure iron, a highly susceptible material that should have oxidized and crumbled into brown dust hundreds of years ago under the brutal cycle of Indian monsoon rains and scorching heat.
When modern metallurgists finally analyzed the pillar at a microscopic level, they discovered that the ancient smiths engineered a complex protective layer of iron hydrogen phosphate hydrate directly onto the surface. This crystalline film forms an impenetrable microscopic barrier that completely stops the oxygen and moisture in the atmosphere from interacting with the vulnerable iron underneath. Creating this specific chemical structure requires an incredibly advanced understanding of phosphorus extraction and a deeply controlled heating environment that mainstream historians claim simply did not exist at the time of its creation. The smelting process necessary to weld this much pure iron together into a single uniform monument requires prolonged temperatures that primitive mud furnaces could not physically maintain. The structural integrity of the pillar proves that the builders were actively manipulating the elemental chemistry of the iron at an atomic level to grant it near immortality. This advanced chemical mastery over solid elements directly paved the way for a devastating architectural project that carved a sprawling, impossible nightmare straight out of a solid cliff.
Topic number 5. Kailasa Temple. An army of unknown engineers carved an entire multi-story temple complex by slicing straight down into the solid bedrock of a basalt cliff, completely eliminating the possibility of human error. Located in India, the Kailasa Temple is the largest monolithic structure in the world, meaning it is not made of separate stones placed on top of each other, but is entirely one single massive rock. The builders started at the very top of the mountain and dug vertically downward, removing an estimated 400,000 tons of brutal volcanic rock to reveal the intricate courtyards, giant elephant statues, and hollowed-out prayer halls hiding inside. A single mistake, a microscopic crack in the wrong place, or a slightly miscalculated blow would have ruined the entire structure permanently, as there is absolutely no way to put a piece of rock back once it is removed from the mountain. Modern excavation crews using dynamite and heavy hydraulic machinery would struggle to safely remove that extreme volume of stone without shattering the delicate load-bearing pillars required to hold up the heavy stone roofs. The logistical nightmare of hauling 400,000 tons of heavy rubble out of a constantly deepening pit while simultaneously carving delicate artwork defies any rational ancient project timeline. The absolute precision required to plan a complex multi-level architectural blueprint from a completely inverted top-down perspective requires a spatial awareness that borders on the impossible. This specific vertical excavation technique reveals a terrifying confidence in carving the earth, leading directly to a monumental physical failure that remains frozen in stone today.
Topic number 4. Yangshan Quarry. 16,000 tons of solid limestone sit partially carved into a mountain base, representing a monument so impossibly massive it openly mocks the physical limitations of the human race. Deep in the mountains of eastern China lies the Yangshan Quarry, where ancient engineers attempted to carve 3 distinct pieces of an apocalyptic stele directly out of the raw bedrock. The largest section, intended to be the base, is over 98 feet long and weighs an estimated 16,000 tons, completely dwarfing any other cut stone on the planet. The official narrative claims that workers during the Ming Dynasty carved these mind-bending shapes intending to move them, but simply abandoned the project when they suddenly realized the rocks were too heavy. However, carving a 16,000-ton block with the strict intention of dragging it miles across mountainous terrain suggests either total collective insanity or the active possession of a lifting technology that has been entirely erased from history. The giant blocks are separated from the mountain by narrow, perfectly sheer channels, showing absolutely none of the messy, chaotic rubble normally associated with ancient hammer and chisel quarrying. Looking closely at the sheer walls, researchers can see uniform scraping marks indicating that massive amounts of material were scooped away at an industrial pace by heavy machinery. The sheer hubris of isolating a piece of the earth heavier than a modern naval destroyer implies a level of transport logistics that modern science simply cannot explain. But isolating a massive rock is an entirely different engineering challenge from cleanly splitting one completely in half.
Topic number 3. Al-Nasla Rock. A colossal sandstone boulder resting on 2 fragile natural pedestals is sliced perfectly down the middle, as if struck by a massive, high-powered orbital laser. Sitting completely isolated in the middle of a barren desert in Saudi Arabia, the Al-Nasla rock formation is totally separated by a razor-thin, perfectly straight vertical gap that fundamentally defies natural geology. The surface of the central cut is completely flat and smooth, showing absolutely no jagged edges, stress fractures, or uneven breaking points that would naturally occur if the rock had violently snapped under pressure or tectonic movement. Geologists desperately struggle to explain how weathering, harsh wind, or natural freezing cycles could possibly create a perfectly parallel surgical slice through the exact center of the stone without toppling the highly precarious balance of the 2 remaining halves. The massive gap is strictly uniform from top to bottom, resembling a mechanical industrial saw cut far more than any natural erosion pattern ever documented in the surrounding region. To achieve this cut mechanically, a blade of enormous scale, tensile strength, and extreme heat resistance would need to be driven straight through the abrasive sandstone at a devastatingly high velocity. This precise cut sits totally alone in the empty desert, offering no historical context and leaving absolutely no trace of the heavy machinery required to split the massive rock in 2. This baffling display of singular, destructive geometric precision points directly to a massive, isolated artifact in Asia that seems to serve absolutely no logical purpose.
Topic number 2. Masuda no Iwafune. An 800-ton block of solid granite sits completely hidden in a Japanese bamboo forest, carved into a bizarre, highly technical shape that closely resembles a crashed piece of heavy machinery. The Masuda no Iwafune, commonly known as the rock ship of Masuda, is a colossal monolith featuring extreme geometric cuts, perfectly flat surfaces, and 2 massive square holes carved directly into its dense center. The structure measures over 36 feet long and sits completely isolated on a steep hillside, showing absolutely no connection to any surrounding ancient architecture, local village, or known religious site. The perfectly straight edges and precise right angles cut into the heavy granite contrast violently with the natural, untamed forest around it, proving beyond any doubt that it was sculpted by an incredibly advanced hand. The deep square indentations are hollowed out with intense mathematical symmetry, completely destroying the mainstream idea that this was merely a natural formation or a primitive religious altar built by early tribes. There are absolutely no tool marks, no ancient inscriptions, and no historical records explaining who possessed the industrial strength required to shape an 800-ton granite boulder in the ancient mountains. Attempting to cut heavy square cavities into solid granite without motorized tools always results in rounded corners and heavily fractured walls, yet this stone features incredibly sharp, crisp geometry. The existence of this massive, unexplained technical artifact forces us to look straight into the darkest underground anomaly that completely rewrites the accepted human timeline. Massive subterranean engineering projects hidden beneath the towering pyramid of the sun utilize an industrial material the ancient builders had absolutely no business possessing. Deep underneath the heavy stone floors in Mexico, archaeologists uncovered multiple secret chambers completely insulated with thick, perfectly cut sheets of pure mica. This specific type of mica did not come from anywhere in North America, as advanced chemical analysis conclusively proves it was actively mined in Brazil. The ancient builders somehow transported thousands of pounds of this incredibly fragile, heat-resistant mineral across 3,000 miles of brutal, unforgiving jungle just to bury it where absolutely no one would ever see it. Mica is a highly specialized element that modern technology uses extensively in complex electronics, aerospace engineering, and nuclear reactors because it can withstand extreme temperatures and electromagnetic radiation without melting or degrading.
The unknown ancient builders stacked these massive sheets into heavy subterranean layers, completely isolating specific underground rooms from the surrounding earth for reasons we still cannot comprehend. Burying vast amounts of an industrial thermal insulator beneath a massive pyramid implies the entire structure was purposely built to contain, generate, or manage intense thermal or electrical energy. The extreme precision required to extract, transport, and layer this fragile mineral without shattering it demands an entire industrial supply chain. The physical presence of aerospace-grade insulation buried deep beneath an ancient city completely destroys our entire timeline of human technological advancement forever.
If you thought this was terrifying, you are not ready for what they found in the video on your screen. Click it right now. The truth is worse than you think.